are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good.
What do you think the Nephilim? What were the Nephilim?
The Nephilim. I believe that the ancient Hebrew text that we call the Torah, the first 5 books that Moses wrote, Genesis chapter 6, describes angels coming down and mating with women.
What kind of angels are we looking at?
Well, these are fallen angels,
okay.
A class of angels that some of the extra-biblical texts, like the book of Enoch and other ancient texts, describes them as a class of angels known as the Watchers.
How does Genesis 6 relate to the present UFO phenomena, or doesn't it?
Well, I think it does relate because you have fallen angels. You have the Hapanai Elohim,
which is what?
Fallen angels. These are powerful beings that have come down, and they're coming down out of the skies. So there's a descent of them. They're in the skies. This relates later in the scriptures too about them being in the air, in the skies. So their presence and their ability, the physics of the dark side, have the ability to the Greek word used metaskizmazidai, to transfigure.
Everything is supposed to reproduce after its own kind, and the Genesis account talks about seed and everything producing after its own kind. And here's a situation where we have angels leaving their prior estate and coming down and mating with humans.
Terribly bad thing. They're seen as transmuted, something that is completely, I believe, an affront to God, and obviously sourced by the dark side.
Something that I've been studying recently has really got me thinking is in the ancient texts, in the book of Enoch in particular, it says that the Watchers that committed the Genesis 6 experiment, that mated with women, would be buried under the sands of the earth for 70 generations. Now, if my calculations are correct, I believe the Genesis 6 experiment took place in 3550 BC. First generation were killed off in 500 years. And then the Watchers were judged and buried under the sands for 70 generations. So that's sometime after 3050 BC. Well, Psalm 90 verse 10 defines a generation as 70 years, so simple math. 70 times 70 is 4,900 years. 4,900 years from roughly 3050 puts you at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s. If you think about the 20th century, we had a massive explosion of technology. We went from horse and buggy to space shuttles and computers. So for thousands of years, it was kind of status quo.
Right.
And then everything changed.
Men and women who get these implants removed, they don't want any notoriety, and they just want these things out. They talk about being taken someplace where sometimes for the women, ovum is taken. Dr. Lear mentions this. Sperm is taken from the males. What is going on with that, in your opinion?
I think, again, in that, similar to, the whole issue with Nephilim was a combination. Because in conception, sperm and egg, there is an explosion in human life. Mark of the Beast, from the biblical word, has the idea of branding, that there's an identification side to it, an ownership side to it. But it's more than just that, because it alters, it affects their will. They cannot turn back. It affects everything about them. So if it is something that's even injected or something that is connected, and there would be something spiritually there too. So this is an alteration of humanity, and and once that's done, there just simply is no, like a Nephilim themselves. They could not morph out of it.
When the barcodes came out, they thought it was 666. I don't necessarily believe it's a microchip either, although it could be involved. I think that it is actually a genetic marker that is part of the Nephilim that permanently changes and rewrites people's DNA.
Say that again. Permanently does what?
It permanently rewrites somebody's DNA. So they are no longer redeemable at that point. Because if you read the ancient text, so the book of Revelation is a very prophetic text talking about the last days. It says that people beg for death and death flees from them. They purchase a counterfeit immortality.
We left the military facility and are now back in Los Angeles, where we met with Doug Hamp and Dr. Chuck Missler, both experts on the Nephilim.
And just one thing really quick is when we talk about DNA and seed, we're really talking more about a code than we are simply about a physical medium. If I have a CD-ROM, the piece of plastic may cost a few pennies, but the information that's written on there could be priceless.
Sure.
And so that's what we're really talking about. When a seed is, we're talking about really information and data. And now there's an incredible process called recombinant DNA.
Right.
Recombinant DNA is a process by which they can open up a DNA strand insert a foreign gene into that, and then it becomes a new chimeric or hybrid DNA strain.
And this is happening
This is happening
right now.
And,
Real time, yeah.
I was giving a talk on this, and afterward, someone came up to me. She says, I teach high school biology, and we're actually doing that in our AP classes. I was floored. I'm like, seriously? You're doing this at high school?
When we see things like whether it's UFOs or some of these other paranormal or supernatural phenomenon, we shouldn't be surprised, because that's at the boundary area of our understanding of our physical universe. And so now that as these things are increasing, that to me would be a symptom that we're moving into a climax of something. What's interesting is if you connect the dots here, it seems as if these abductions seem to be preoccupied with the human reproductive process. It's almost as if they're gathering data to try to understand what's going on. One of the conjectures that comes out of this is that they're not getting what they used to get. You see, in other words, back apparently in Genesis 6, they got these giants. They were super, the hybrids were of a super quality. And what they apparently, one would infer, are getting today are these diminutive, strange byproducts. And so the problem is maybe the degeneration of the human genome over the last several thousand years. Right. And what they're trying to study. Because, see, this is the only way they have to multiply their forces. Angels don't reproduce, but the hybrids do.